you curious about BFME mods but don't know where to start? Or maybe you're someone a bit more experienced in the BFME modding world and really like comparing and contrasting how mods have breathed new life into these classic games. Whatever kind of BFME gamer you are, my BFME channel, the Dwarven Hold, has a few things to satisfy your curiosity. This series of videos is dedicated to analyzing the mechanics of the Battle for Middle-earth 2, its expansion, Rise of the Witch King, and the critically acclaimed overhaul mod, Age of the Ring. I'll be comparing and contrasting ROTWK and AOTR specifically though, since AOTR is based specifically off of Rise of the Witch King more than BFME2, even while BFME2 and ROTWK share the same mechanics. But why compare at all? They are, after all, separate games with their own meta, player bases, and so on. What's the point? This is a fair question. I think that it's fair to say each of these games is its own separate entity, and that most players will probably not feel so inclined into such an analysis, feeling rather content with the game or games they know and love, and I have a great respect for such players. But there are many players who want to see new life breathed into these old but great games. Folks who have longed to see much more of both the books and the movies brought to life in a sprawling RTS game the likes of which we've yet to see. This is what the Age of the Ring offers. And there are scores of players who do not know what the Age of the Ring mod is at all, and just the kind of quality overhaul it offers to these games. It doesn't feel like a mod so much as the Battle for Middle-earth 3 we never got, so it's worthy of serious consideration for any player who loves the BFME titles. And one of the ways of seriously considering it is through comparing it to the games we've had for decades. It's really an all too natural thing to do. Why should I play this new thing when the original has been just fine, many folks will say. What can it really offer me? Does it really do X, Y, or Z better than A, B, or C of the originals? The overhauls the Age of the Ring mod implements go from graphics to voice work, all new factions and units, to the very mechanics themselves, offering a tight competitive game which attracts pro tournaments several times a year while still welcoming casual gamers like myself to play how they want to play. My BFME channel, the Dwarven Hold, is dedicated to comparing BFME2 and ROTWK to the Age of the Ring mod, with a bit of other mods like the Adine mod thrown in where applicable. It's to shine a light on these games in ways I haven't seen anyone else out there doing. It's for players like myself who have wondered which is better, the vanilla games or the mods. I can't answer that question, but I can certainly explore it. For anyone like myself who never took the modding world seriously for a long time, this series of videos is for you, and something I wish I had long ago. I hope it scratches an itch for those curious about BFME mods in general, and certainly for those who want to know more about what the Age of the Ring offers but don't know where to start. So in this series of videos, we'll start with comparing the mechanics of these games and the Attribute Modifier or leadership system. I won't be looking at the code, but just what you'll see in-game, so don't worry about these videos getting too technical and in the weeds. As you follow along, you'll steadily understand just how widely different the system is in BFME2 and ROTWK compared to the Age of the Ring mod, and how the latter greatly streamlines and simplifies it. You'll see just how unnecessarily convoluted the system is in the vanilla games, how it constricts strategic creativity and freedom, especially in team games, and how the Age of the Ring system offers unlimited variety in styles of play for either solo players or team players. It truly is a difference of night and day. So without further ado, let's begin to compare the systems of these games. In the first episode of this series, we'll start with a simple introduction to the leadership mechanic of the vanilla game. What I call simply the leadership system doesn't seem to have a proper name. It's usually called the Attribute Modifier system or something to that effect. It's divided into 4 main mechanics: leadership, buffs, spells, and debuffs. There are 4 different modifier types to default damage and armor of units that, in the case of the first 3, boost those stats, or in the case of the last one, decrease them. Each of these mechanics works differently than the others in terms of how they are countered, how they stack with each other, how rare they are, costs, how long they last, their sources, and other factors. These episodes are to help establish the sharp contrast between the version of this system in the vanilla game and the massive overhaul implemented in its mod, the Age of the Ring, aka AOTR. Due to so many details in the whole system, we'll first look at just the leadership modifier in this episode. We'll follow it up in later episodes with the buffs, spells, and debuffs modifiers, covering just what works and what doesn't work on general units, heroic units, monsters, and heroes. To understand the leadership mechanic, let's look at how a cheap Tier 1 unit, the Gondor Swordsman, fares without it. This is a Tier 1 unit up against a Tier 2 unit, Angmar's Dark Dunedain. Neither side is upgraded and both sides are level 1. Notice that there are 10 units per battalion for Angmar, but 15 for Gondor. The Gondor Swordsman could barely touch the Dark Dunedain. 39 units of 40 remain. Now let's see how they do with, say, Aragorn and his leadership. It's a good time to note that leaderships are standardized across the board in the vanilla game, so no matter which hero you use, if that hero has leadership, it'll have the same stat boost as another hero. This is not the case at all in AOTR, but more on that in a later episode. Now, back to Aragorn buffing out his troops.
This is our time.
He provides a substantial leadership bonus that adds up with buffs and spells. It can be confusing or unclear when a leadership is implemented, though. Notice the gold glow around the feet of the Gondor troops indicating which ones are buffed. Let's see how effective it is on its own for a Tier 1 cheap unit against the advanced Angmar troops. Aragorn is programmed in this demonstration to stay back so as not to interfere with the battle. Throughout this series, this will remain the case. This is to allow for objective and clear observation of the leadership mechanics. There is a decent difference with Aragorn's leadership. 27 enemy units remain, as opposed to 39 without him. Angmar's Dark Dunedain are some of the toughest swordsmen in the game as a Tier 2 unit. Even Aragorn won't suffice. At a cost of 570 CP, their cost reflects their stats, as is always the case for all units. The Gondor swordsmen are only 250 at 60 CP. Now that we've seen the impact of the leadership modifier type, let's explore whether multiple leaderships stack at all, and touch briefly on how that compares with the overhaul mod Age of the Rings modifier system. In Part 1, Section A, we took a brief look at the impact of heroes with leadership. In this video, we'll explore whether leaderships stack with each other, as it's been an assumed function on the part of many players I've seen for a long time. This is to help clear the air once and for all about the vanilla game. We'll also tease a little bit about how AOTR's leadership modifier works at the end. But what about adding other heroes? Let's see what happens with both Aragorn and Boromir.
We shall win this war.
The result is basically the same, 31 units, though up from the previous 27. Results like this are part of the flow of battle. The following is an important part of the leadership description. When you see this description for any hero with leadership in the vanilla game, it says the same thing. Notice the phrase stacks with buffs and spells. It does not say stacks with leaderships as well. Notice the phrase modifier type leadership. Leadership is a term that applies to the mechanics of select heroes and select structures, like heroic statues. So when you see the description not say it stacks with leaderships, no matter how many heroes and statues are in play, the outcome will always be only one leadership working, not any others. This is radically different in AOTR, as will be seen in a later episode. That leaderships don't stack in vanilla is due to a major design flaw in the code, but more on that later. But let's see this flaw in play all the same by throwing everything but the kitchen sink at the Dark Dunedain. Here you can see the Gondor troops are buffed by Aragorn, Boromir, Theoden, Faramir, a statue, Haldir, and Elrond. All of these provide leadership.
Waiting for orders. Fear the Iron Throne.
34 of 40 remain, up from the 31 units from before. As you can see, this flaw is a fairly serious one which AOTR fixes. So what exactly is so different about the leadership system of AOTR? Well, as a tease, here's a brief breakdown between the vanilla leadership system, as will be covered in the next few episodes, and AOTR's, as covered later in the series. In the next episode, though, we'll look at buffs at work and how they stack with leaderships.